India's next big fighter hunt. Search for 114 frontline jets. Government signals global Air Force contest. 8 fighters in mega dogfight. Crucial need, but big concerns. What's Atmanirbhar about this? Mother of all deals 2.0. Hello and very warm welcome to all of our viewers. This is a Diwali special dhamaka episode of Battle Cry, and it truly is a potential dhamaka, viewer, because we're now talking about the Indian government rebooting the biggest ever contest out there to give the Indian Air Force 114 new generation multi-role fighter aircraft. It's called the MRFA for multi-role fighter aircraft, and it is for 114 of the contenders that you see on your screen. The intention now is that most of these will be built here in India as part of a local production line, with a handful of them being imported from abroad. In case you're getting a sense of deja vu, well, it isn't just a deja vu, because this is something that has almost identically happened over the last couple of decades. So if you're wondering why a mother of all deals is taking place all over again, didn't the Indian Air Force just spend more than a decade trying to identify such aircraft and buy them? Didn't we just buy the Rafales? Well, you're absolutely right. But the Indian Air Force needs more fighters and has decided to do so. So over the next 30 minutes, I'm going to explain why Mother of all Defense Deals 2.0 is all set to take place, or at least that's what the government has signaled. Let me start first by telling you what the Indian Air Force's current fighter fleet looks like. Let's start at the very basic. The Indian Air Force has about 36 Rafale fighters, 259 Sukhoi Su-30s from Russia, most of which are locally built, 35 Tejas fighters. There are nearly 200 of those homegrown fighters which are currently in the pipeline. Let's move those graphics quickly. There are 60 MiG-29s currently in the Indian Air Force service, 40 Mirage 2000s from France currently in service, and finally there are 40 of the iconic MiG-21 currently in service, but these are on their way out, and it won't be long before the MiG-21s are retired from service after a very long stint. Now, when I told you about that deja vu, you were absolutely right. India has been down this path before. So let me show you a timeline of where things actually began and how we've reached this point. It started in August 2007 when India, under the UPA government at that point of time, kick-started a search for 126 fighters, with 108 to be made in India. That contest was called the MMRCA, or Medium Multi-Role Combat Aircraft. Between 2007 and 2008, 6 fighters from different companies entered the contest from the US, Russia, and Europe. Between 2008 and 2010, the Indian Air Force spent grueling hours field testing these 6 contending fighters in order to arrive at a winning decision. In May 2011, the Indian Air Force shortlisted the Rafale from France and the Typhoon from Germany, Spain, Italy, and the UK as the finalists. In January 2012, the Rafale from France was declared a winner of this contest. Remember, the plan was to acquire 126 of these aircraft. So by January 2012, it was decided the Indian government would acquire 126 Rafales. By February 2014, just before the elections, the UPA government said, we've got no money to proceed with the procurement of 126 Rafale aircraft from France. It's simply too expensive a deal. Then the government changed in 2014. In April 2015, the Modi government announced a new deal for only 36 French-built Rafale jets. No made in India, not 126, 36 imported Rafale jets. In September 26, India and France signed a deal for those 36 Rafale jets. Between 2018 and 2019, there was a Rafale scam politics that was led by the Congress Party and Rahul Gandhi. In October 2019, the first Indian Air Force Rafale was delivered. In January 2022, the Rafale began trials in a separate Indian Navy contest for 26 jets. That's a deal that could be signed very soon. In December 2022, the delivery of all 36 Indian Air Force Rafales was completed. By July 2023, the Indian Navy declared the Rafale as a winner in its own contest and quest for 26 naval jets for its aircraft carriers. And finally, now in October 2024, the Indian government has signaled a global contest for 114 fighters. And that's where we stand now. And that's what today's episode of Battle Cry is really all about. Now let me show you who the 8 contenders, potential contenders for this big Desi dogfight are going to be. We don't know for sure, but this is what the picture actually looks like. Last time there were 6 contenders. This time there are 8. Contender number 1 is the Rafale. It's a French fighter aircraft. Its strengths are that it's already in service with the Indian Air Force, and therefore it already has a foot in the door. Weaknesses, possible delays in delivery over many, many years. Contender number 2, the F-15 Eagle II. It's an American fighter. Strength, it's modern. Even the US is currently inducting these fighters. Weakness, it's still perceived as a legacy platform. Remember, I still said perceived. Contender number 3 is the Gripen E, which is a Swedish fighter jet. Strength, low cost, quick delivery promised by the makers of the Gripen. Weakness, lightweight supplier nation. Remember, defense procurements are political decisions. Can India really gain anything from a country like Sweden? Contender number 4, the Typhoon. Country, Germany, UK, Spain, and Italy. Strength, finalist in the last Indian contest. It finally lost to the Rafale. Weakness, it was rejected, however, in that last contest, obviously for a reason. Contender number 5, the F-18 Super Hornet. Country, the United States. Strength, combat experience. Weakness, it's perceived as a naval fighter. In fact, it also lost in that recent face-off for an Indian Navy contract. Contender number 6, the F-21, which is a derivative of the F-16. It's an American fighter, of course. Strength, big industrial package because the US Air Force doesn't use them anymore, so they've put their entire might behind the F-21. The weakness, of course, is the F-16 is already in service with Pakistan, so it suffers from a huge perceptional hurdle. Contender number 7, the MiG-35. It's a Russian fighter. Strength, low cost. The variant of the MiG-35, which is the MiG-29, is already in Indian Air Force service. Weakness, the Indian Air Force just doesn't seem to be keen on acquiring any more Russian jets in large numbers, which is why contender number 8 also seems to be not very much in favor going into this contest. It's the Su-35, the Sukhoi Su-35. It's Russian, of course. Strength, it's a frontline fighter with Russia. It's seen combat during the Russia-Ukraine war. Weaknesses, the Indian Air Force already has a huge fleet of its precursor, the Su-30. So why would it need 114 more of a largely similar aircraft, though, of course, much more advanced? The big questions before we go to our experts to decode this entire story now. Number 1, is this the only way to boost fighter numbers? The Indian Air Force has a dwindling squadron strength as far as combat aircraft is concerned. Is this large-scale importing and license building of a foreign fighter the only way to boost fighter numbers? Does India have no homegrown paths to follow? We've got our own combat aircraft programs here in India. Number 3, doesn't this boost India's import dependence, something that the country has been trying to offset for a very long time? Number 4, has Rafale scam politics spooked the government? There have been reports in the newspapers saying the government wants to follow a non-controversial path and therefore it has opened it up to a global tender or intends to open it up to a global tender once again. And finally, number 5 is doubling down on an Indian twin-engine fighter, an outside option given the complexities and huge money that will be spent on another such contest. Now, you've heard very, very basic information to paint a background of this entire story. But let's bring in the experts to help us understand better what the path ahead really looks like. Air Marshal Anil Chopra is former Director General of the Center for Air Power Studies. Angad Singh is our favorite air power analyst and author. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being with me here on Battle Cry. Air Marshal Anil Chopra, I'd kick it off with you. The sense of this being a flashback, the sense of us having been down this road again, is what the first thought was for a lot of people when they saw those reports about a global hunt being kick-started by the government potentially in the next few months, to look for 114 fighters. Your initial thoughts on this signal from the government, Air Marshal?
Firstly, I must tell you, Shiv, that you have covered all 8 aircraft pluses and minuses so beautifully. And I have been writing on the same subject for long. I must mention that I was also a member of the high-level technical oversight committee for the Rafale deal. And we all have seen how the Rafale deal went through. But today, there is an urgency. We need fighter aircraft very quickly. Why? Mark 1A, which was to come in on 31st of March this year, is now postponed to maybe 31st of March next year or even later because VG 414 has been further delayed. No more November. It's now going to be sometime in March. The last MiG-21 squadron will retire next year. And this is going to have a cascading effect down the line. Right. Even if we were to buy 114 aircraft today and all the LCA Mark 1A, Mark 2, AMCA, everything was to move as per the original plan, we will not have 42 squadrons till 2038. And I have done it graphically. I have, marked how it's going to be. So therefore, there is an urgency. Now, the various options were there. We had, RFI for these 8 contenders came in 2018. RFI in, that means responses. And now we are in 24 and the RFP hasn't even gone. And now we hear about the open tender. The 8 contenders in the last 15 years have greatly changed. The F-15, of course, is the new contender, and the remaining have all upgraded in 15 years, a long time. So there is a need to take a call as to why are we looking and what are we wanting. Okay. We are looking at cost, we are looking at transfer technology, we are looking at the physical technology and capability, we are looking at make in India, we are looking at life cycle cost, we are looking at future of upgrades, we are looking at maintainability. All these things are being talked about in the so-called open tender that may be there. 8 of them will surely pitch in. Could there be another fighter? I can't think of, because there are not many more fighters left who can pitch in for this. Do we need to go through another full 6-year evaluation process that we did in the MRCCA program? I think that will push the whole acquisition much later.
Is this the only path that you see, going forward? Is there no other path for the government or the Air Force?
No, there is no, because you have to buy a interim fighter.
Emashla was asking Angad. I'll come back to you.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So,
Shiv, you know what they say about the definition of madness. So we essentially found ourselves back there. I think this tender, this fresh tender, fresh evaluation is needlessly cautious. The Air Force, which is frankly the only perspective that matters. Yeah. The Air Force knows what it wants. The Air Force knows what is viable. The government knows what it wants in terms of in industrial activity, transfer of technology, whatever non-operational elements there are to this deal. The government knows what it wants on that front. The Air Force knows what it wants on the operational front. Price is the only variable. If the government is serious about this, then now's the time to begin discussions on price and stop wasting time on reinventing this evaluation wheel.
But let our viewers in on that, Angad. What does if the Air Force knows what it wants, what does it want?
Rafale, it's in service, as you brought out in your roundup before this segment. It's in service. We've paid, the Indian government has paid good money for India-specific enhancements, those modifications that bring the Rafale to the level required by the Indian Air Force. Why are we not amortizing that money over more airframes? Why are we? This whole thing seems to me like a terrible waste of time. on every front. Every moment we delay, it's not just the Air Force that suffers. It's if you have an industrial strategy, if you have a plan to leverage an MRFA scale purchase for industrial purposes, for technology purposes, then every minute you delay, you're diluting those benefits as well. It makes no sense at this stage to rerun any competition, to look at 6, 7, 8 contenders, Baker's dozen, any of that nonsense. It's time to, again, if the government is convinced of the utility of an MRFA, of 100-odd fighters to be procured for the Indian Air Force, independent of what's already on the cards domestically, then wasting time makes absolutely no sense.
Is Marshal Chopra, is the government wrong to be overly sensitive about controversies and politics over acquisitions? If anything, the fact that the government has gone in now for what is potentially a second acquisition of Rafale fighters for the Indian Navy means that those controversies didn't really matter at the end of the day. Why are they making controversy a sticking issue now? As Angad says, the aircraft is in service. Huge amounts of money have been spent on infrastructure, on India-specific enhancements. Doesn't India have the power to ensure that any perceived delays can be handled? After all, the Indian Air Force will finally be the largest operator of the Rafale aircraft then.
Yeah, absolutely, Shiv. You brought out in your preamble initial statements that, multiplicity of fighter fleets, we all know. What a large number. Do you want to add another type? Or if the Navy has already chosen Rafale M and we are going to go ahead with that, isn't it a good idea to have numbers? As Angad said, we already have the bases, we already have infrastructure, and we have paid some money for the one-time enhancements. There is no doubt about it. And I don't think that there will be politics this time. The numbers will matter. Those 26 added to 114 will be a significant number worth Make in India. And there is a need to fast track. We need to do things very fast. Mind you, every deal with Americans and Russia and Soviet Union till date, every deal has been a G2G. And if we have done a G2G with the French, the price has been already established. And I think there is no other choice at this moment. And even if, we have to repeat this, the same thing, that Rafale is the only choice if we really want to do things very, very fast. And I must also mention the French Air Force is bringing in F4, the latest version of the Rafale. F5 they are working on. F5 is going to be ready by 2029, and we should be inbuilt in the contract that we will have these upgrades, F4 and subsequently F5. In fact, the initial contract should be for F4 itself. And there is no reason for us to introduce yet another type in such small numbers, more so because the Navy has already shortlisted Rafale, yes.
Angad, I wanted your view on, this. There is a perception also that India is about to potentially indulge in something that you called madness. I actually agree. At a time when the fighters that appear to be potentially in contention are all, 4+ generation fighters. In a world where we're talking about 5th generation fighters, a very rapid capitalization of the Chinese Air Force, many different new generation airframes coming up from many different countries. In that perspective, do you think that sense will prevail? Or do you think it's going to be the Indian government going through this because of the huge pressures of squadron depletion, etc.?
If I understand correctly, you're basically asking about the balance of power based on 4th generation versus 5th generation aircraft, right? That's something that I've written about extensively, and it's not to overuse the phrase, but it's something that does keep me up at night. But the fact is that MRFA today in 2024, MRFA is necessary as a hedge against exactly what you've mentioned. The fact is that, so the numbers is the most obvious argument in favor of MRFA, right? You create a parallel delivery stream of aircraft to be inducted alongside LCA variants, the Mark II whenever it comes out, the AMCA and so on and so forth. But its very existence is a hedge against further delays and failures on those programs. Right. So from that perspective, it's eminently sensible on its own. But it's also useful to note at this juncture in 2024, that an MRFA class of aircraft is also the only type of aircraft, the only class of aircraft that is a hedge against delays in AMCA as well. You can't hedge against a 5th generation aircraft with a 4th generation aircraft in absolute terms.
Right.
But this sort of class of aircraft of high performance, modern, contemporary, fourth plus, four and a half generation aircraft is the closest you can get to a fifth generation aircraft. So if AMCA is delayed, if we fall behind in the fifth generation race, then this class of aircraft is the only thing that will be able to make up that shortfall in any meaningful sense.
Is there a risk, Marshal Chopra, is there a risk of India falling behind in the race for fifth generation aircraft? As Angad, very importantly mentioned, this particular acquisition will literally be a kind of safeguard or a hedge against any potential delays in the, in the future aviation programs that India has, including the fifth generation AMCA. Do you think India is going to be able to keep those things on track?
Undoubtedly, I agree with Angad that, see the past history. We've seen LCA Mark 1. We had the first flight in 2001. In 2015, 14 years later, we formed a squadron with 2 aircraft. And today, in 2024, end of 2024, 40 aircraft with the Indian Air Force. Total built 50, including the test aircraft. So that is the kind of timelines. Already a delay in Mark 1A by one year. Instead of 3 years, it's going to take 4 years for the first delivery.
Yeah.
AMCA is a much, much more complex, thing. Fifth generation, not easy for us to handle. And my personal feeling, my biggest worry is Pakistan is already talking to China for fifth generation aircraft. They want the J-31. They are already talking with Turkey, with the Khan. In fact, 20 technicians from Pakistan already were there. They are going to be in AMCA. My personal feeling is that it won't induct before 2035 to 2038. That's the timeline. And imagine if 2029, as the Pakistan Air Chief has said, that they will have a fifth generation aircraft, what feeling the country is going to have. So there is bound to be delay. Nothing happens perfectly. All aeroplane programs in the world, including the F-35, has had delayed. And they had the backing of technologies and monies that we do not have. And therefore, this urgency that we have to quickly bridge the gap. We have to cater for the delays. We are already short of numbers.
Absolutely.
We have a two-threat scenario. And China is growing. In 2035, China is going to have 1,000 fifth-generation aircraft. More than the entire strength of Indian Air Force, they will have in the fifth generation. That is the reason why we need to not only buy the 1144, but we have to do it very, very quickly. Yes.
Angad, I'll leave the last comment with you then, because we started with madness. So I'm going to ask you, if the Indian Air Force knows what it wants and it wants what it has already inducted, and you've reported extensively on the slightly maddening cycle of defense procurement in this country. Do you think sense will prevail, or do you think we're actually going to go through another, extensive, half-decade-long trial and search for another fighter aircraft?
Well, at this point, one can only hope that sense prevails. But I think the bigger picture, the meat of the matter is not just MRFA, right? We're hoping that sense prevails more broadly across the aerospace industrial ecosystem. This is what's holding us back. This is why we keep finding ourselves, every decade or so at this sort of crisis crossroads. So it's not just sense having to prevail on this one procurement issue. It's also we have to step back, zoom out a little bit, and take a look at why things are getting so out of hand so frequently.
A zoom out is necessary, a broader approach is necessary. Every procurement cycle of this kind, perhaps offers an opportunity for precisely that kind of zooming out, taking stock and making sure we don't arrive at this kind of every decade crossroads, as Angad put it. And I couldn't agree more with the both of you in your assessment of what this program means and where things will actually go from here. Hopefully we'll have more than just signals and quotes from the government, and we'll have some clarity on what the flight path ahead actually looks like. Angad Singh, Air Marshal Anil Chopra, always a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time here on Battle Cry, and wishing both of you a very happy Deepavali as well. Well, that's it on this special episode. Also wishing all of our viewers once again a very happy Deepavali. Thank you so much for watching. The news continues on the other side right here on India Today.